Abigail Reed clutched her champagne flute tighter than necessary as she scanned the unfamiliar faces at her cousin's wedding reception. She hadn't wanted to come alone, but her date had canceled last minute, leaving her to navigate the sea of couples and family members who would inevitably ask about her perpetually single status. The ornate ballroom of the Harrington Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements, making her feel even more out of place in her hastily chosen emerald dress. "Table 14, the usher said, pointing toward a round table near the dance floor. Abigail nodded her thanks and made her way through the crowd, mentally preparing for small talk with strangers. As she approached, she noticed most seats were already taken, except for two adjacent ones. She slid into one of them, offering a polite smile to the other occupants. "Is this seat taken?" A deep voice asked from beside her. Abigail turned to find herself staring into the most arresting pair of blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with dark hair and a tailored suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. "No, please," she gestured to the empty chair, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Sebastian Nielsen," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but gentle as they shook. "I'm a friend of the groom." Abigail Reed. "The bride's cousin," she replied, instantly regretting how formal she sounded. "Though everyone calls me Abby," Sebastian smiled, revealing a slight dimple in his left cheek. "Abby it is, then." "How do you know Drew?" she asked, referring to the groom, college roommates. "We've been friends for over a decade now," Sebastian replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Though our paths diverged quite a bit after graduation." Before Abigail could ask what he meant, the MC announced the arrival of the newlyweds, and everyone rose to their feet, applauding. As the couple made their entrance, Sebastian leaned closer to be heard over the music. "Your cousin looks beautiful," he said. "She does," Abigail agreed, watching her cousin Melissa twirl in her elegant white gown. "They both look so happy." "That's the goal, isn't it?" Sebastian's voice carried a hint of wistfulness. The evening progressed with dinner, speeches, and the traditional first dance. Throughout it all, Abigail found herself engaged in conversation with Sebastian. He was surprisingly easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to her answers. "So, you're a children's librarian?" Sebastian asked as they finished their dessert. Abigail nodded. "For 5 years now. I organize reading programs and literacy events for kids in underserved communities." "That's incredible," Sebastian said, his admiration seeming genuine. "Making a difference in children's lives. That's meaningful work." "Thank you," she replied, unaccustomed to having someone take such interest in her career. "What about you? What do you do?" Sebastian hesitated, swirling the remaining wine in his glass. "I'm in shipping, international cargo logistics." "Sounds complicated," Abigail commented. "It can be," he admitted with a modest shrug. "But it's just moving things from one place to another when you break it down." Their conversation was interrupted when the DJ invited all single guests to the dance floor for the bouquet and garter toss. Abigail felt her face flush. "I think I'll sit this one out," she said. Sebastian smiled. "Not a fan of wedding traditions? Not ones that highlight my singleness in front of 200 people, she replied with a self-deprecating laugh. "Fair enough," he said. "I'm not rushing out there either." Instead, Sebastian suggested they step outside for some air. The hotel had a beautiful garden terrace illuminated by soft string lights. The night air was cool but pleasant, and the distant sounds of the reception provided a muted backdrop to their conversation. "So, Abby Reed, besides being a children's librarian and wedding skeptic, what else should I know about you?" Sebastian asked, leaning against the stone balustrade. Abigail laughed, surprising herself with how comfortable she felt. "I'm hardly a wedding skeptic. I just don't enjoy being paraded as one of the sad singles." "You don't seem sad to me," Sebastian said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Abigail felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of something unexpected. The moment was broken by the vibration of Sebastian's phone. He frowned as he checked the screen. "I apologize, but I need to take this. Work emergency?" Abigail nodded, watching as he stepped away to take the call. His posture changed immediately, shoulders straightening as he spoke in low, authoritative tones. She couldn't hear the conversation, but his commanding presence was evident even from a distance. When he returned, his expression was apologetic. "I'm really sorry, but I have to cut the evening short. There's a situation at work that needs my attention." "Of course," Abigail said, trying to hide her disappointment. "It was nice meeting you, Sebastian." He hesitated, then pulled out a business card from his wallet. "I've enjoyed talking with you, Abby. Perhaps we could continue our conversation another time." Abigail accepted the card, her fingers brushing against his. "I'd like that." Only after Sebastian had left did she look at the card in her hand. Embossed in elegant typography was his name and title. Sebastian Nielsen, CEO, Nielsen Global Shipping and Logistics. Below that was a company logo she immediately recognized from news articles and business magazines, one of the largest private shipping companies in the world. She nearly dropped the card in shock. She'd spent the entire evening talking to a shipping magnate worth billions, and he'd made it sound like he drove a delivery truck. The next morning, Abigail woke to a text from an unknown number. "I enjoyed our conversation last night. Would you be interested in having coffee sometime?" Sebastian, she stared at her phone, conflicted. The man she'd met was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in her work. But now that she knew who he really was, she couldn't help feeling intimidated. What could a billionaire possibly see in a children's librarian who lived in a cramped apartment with a perpetually shedding cat? After deliberating for hours, she finally replied, "Coffee sounds nice. When and where?" Sebastian suggested a small cafe near the library where she worked for the following afternoon. Not some exclusive, high-end establishment as she'd feared, but a cozy neighborhood spot known for its ethically sourced beans and homemade pastries. When she arrived, slightly early and more nervous than she cared to admit, Sebastian was already there. He'd traded his formal suit for dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that made his eyes appear even more striking. "I was worried you might not come," he said as she approached his table. "I almost didn't," she admitted, sitting across from him. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Sebastian looked down at his coffee. "Because when people find out, they stop seeing me and start seeing my net worth." He met her gaze directly. "I wanted you to know me as a person first." "And what kind of person are you, Sebastian Nielsen?" Abigail asked, her voice gentler than she intended. "The kind who'd rather discuss children's literature with a passionate librarian than network with industry tycoons," he replied with a smile. "The kind who wants to know if you'd give me a chance to prove that I'm more than just my company." Their coffee date extended into dinner at a nearby restaurant, where they continued their conversation from the wedding. Sebastian spoke about growing up as the son of a dock worker, how he'd started with a single cargo ship inherited from his grandfather and built it into an empire. Abigail shared stories from the library, her dreams of starting a mobile reading program to reach even more children, and her love for classic literature. By the end of the evening, Abigail had nearly forgotten about Sebastian's wealth. The connection between them felt authentic, based on mutual respect and genuine interest rather than status or appearances. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other regularly. Sebastian joined her for a children's reading hour at the library, sitting cross-legged on the floor among 5-year-olds, completely engrossed in her animated telling of Where the Wild Things Are. Abigail accompanied him to a charity gala where he proudly introduced her to his colleagues not as his date, but as the brilliant librarian who's revolutionizing children's literacy programs. Their third date was when Sebastian first kissed her, a gentle press of lips that left her breathless as they stood outside her apartment building. Their fifth date ended with her inviting him upstairs, where they spent the night exploring each other with the same curiosity and attentiveness they'd shown in their conversations. But reality couldn't be kept at bay forever. 2 months into their relationship, a tabloid published photos of them together with the headline, "Shipping Tycoon's New Romance with Unknown Woman." The article speculated about Abigail's intentions and Sebastian's surprising choice of partner. Abigail was shelving books in the children's section when her coworker, Tina, rushed over with her phone. "Is this you?" Tina asked, showing her the article. Abigail's stomach dropped as she read the cruel insinuations. The comments section was even worse, with strangers debating what Sebastian could possibly see in someone so ordinary. "Earth to Abby," Tina said, waving a hand in front of her face. "Are you dating a billionaire and didn't tell me?" "He's not," Abigail began, then stopped. Sebastian was a billionaire. That was a fact she'd been trying to ignore, focusing instead on the man who brought her coffee in bed and texted her photos of dogs he saw on the street because they made him think of her. "It's complicated," she finally said. That evening, Sebastian called her, his voice tight with concern. "I'm sorry about the article. I should have warned you that this might happen." "It's fine," Abigail lied, picking at a loose thread on her couch. "No, it's not," Sebastian replied. "But I want you to know that none of what they wrote matters to me. What matters is us, what we're building together." "And what exactly are we building, Sebastian?" Abigail asked, voicing the doubt that had been growing since seeing the article. "We come from completely different worlds." "I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons. You probably have people who shop for you." "I don't actually," he said with a touch of amusement. "I'm perfectly capable of buying my own clothes." "That's not the point," Abigail sighed. "The point is, I'm starting to wonder if this can really work long term. You're used to a certain lifestyle that I know nothing about." "Then let me show you," Sebastian said. "Not to convert you, but so you can see that part of my life too, the same way you've shown me yours." The following weekend, Sebastian took her to his home, a modern glass and steel mansion overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful but surprisingly warm, with books scattered on side tables and a kitchen that showed signs of actual use. He introduced her to his small household staff not as employees, but as people who'd been with his family for years and had become like extended family themselves. "I don't live here to show off," Sebastian explained as they walked along his private beach. "I live here because the ocean reminds me of my grandfather and where our company began. It keeps me grounded." As the sun set, casting golden light across the waves, Sebastian took Abigail's hands in his. "I know this is all overwhelming," he said, "and I understand your concerns. But I need you to know something." He paused, his blue eyes searching hers. "I've dated women who fit seamlessly into this world, who expected the mansions and the yachts and the private jets, but I've never met anyone who makes me feel the way you do." "And how's that?" Abigail asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I'm just Sebastian, not a CEO or a billionaire or whatever label people want to put on me. With you, I can just be myself," he said. "That's worth more to me than anything I own." Their relationship deepened over the following months, navigating the challenges of their different worlds. Abigail grew accustomed to occasional paparazzi attention and the raised eyebrows of some of Sebastian's business associates. Sebastian became a regular at her small apartment, cooking dinner in her tiny kitchen and helping her with community reading events. 6 months after they met, Sebastian proposed a business partnership. His foundation would fund Abigail's dream of creating mobile libraries for underserved communities. The project would be hers to run independently, with no strings attached. "This isn't because we're dating," he insisted when she hesitated. "It's because it's a brilliant idea that deserves support. If anything, I was worried about proposing it because we're involved. But I'd be a fool to let a good initiative go unfunded because I'm afraid of how it might look." Abigail eventually agreed, and the Reed Reading Roadsters program was born. The first converted bus library launched 3 months later, bringing books and literacy programs to neighborhoods where children had limited access to reading materials. Seeing the joy on children's faces as they climbed aboard the colorful bus filled Abigail with a sense of purpose and accomplishment like nothing she'd experienced before. On the night of the program's successful launch, Sebastian took her to dinner at the cafe where they'd had their first real date. "I'm so proud of what you've created," he said, raising his glass to toast her. "You've changed those children's lives." "We did it together," Abigail acknowledged, touching her glass to his. Sebastian shook his head. "I just provided resources. The vision, the heart of it, that was all you." After dinner, they walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the dark surface of the bay. Sebastian seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous, which was so unlike his typical confident demeanor that Abigail grew concerned. "Is everything okay?" she asked, stopping to face him. Sebastian took a deep breath. "I had this whole speech prepared, but now that we're here, I can't remember a word of it." He laughed softly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Abigail's heart seemed to stop as he dropped to one knee before her. "Abby Reed, meeting you was the most fortunate accident of my life. That random seating arrangement at your cousin's wedding brought me the one thing all my success couldn't buy: true happiness." He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. "I love you, your compassion, your intelligence, your ability to see me for who I really am. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Abigail's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Sebastian slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with such tenderness that passers-by stopped to watch, smiling at the evident love between them. Their engagement made headlines, of course. This time, Abigail was prepared for the attention. What she hadn't expected was the outpouring of support from the communities she served through her literacy program. Children made congratulatory cards, parents sent well wishes, and her colleagues threw a surprise engagement party at the library. They decided on a relatively small wedding by Nielsen standards, just 200 guests, instead of the 1,000 that Sebastian's mother initially proposed. The ceremony would take place on the beach behind Sebastian's home, with a reception in the gardens. As the wedding planning progressed, Abigail and Sebastian faced another decision: where they would live after getting married. Sebastian offered to move into her apartment, but Abigail knew that wasn't practical given his business requirements and security needs. Yet the thought of leaving her cozy apartment for his mansion made her anxious. "What if we found a new place together?" Sebastian suggested one evening as they discussed the issue. "Something that would be ours, not mine or yours. A fresh start." The idea appealed to Abigail, and they began house hunting. To her surprise, Sebastian favored charming historical homes over modern mansions. They eventually found a restored Victorian with a sprawling library and gardens near enough to both their workplaces to be convenient. "I can see us raising a family here," Sebastian said as they toured the house for the second time. Abigail's heart swelled at the thought. "So can I." The day before their wedding, Sebastian surprised Abigail with a gift, a first edition of Anne of Green Gables, her favorite childhood book. "To remind you that no matter how much our lives change, some things remain constant," he said as she carefully turned the fragile pages. "My love for you being at the top of that list." Their wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Abigail stood in one of the guest rooms of Sebastian's house, looking at herself in the mirror. Her dress was elegant but simple, a flowing ivory gown that caught the sea breeze. Her hair was adorned with small white flowers, and around her neck hung a pendant that had belonged to her grandmother. "You look beautiful," her mother said, dabbing at her eyes. "I always knew you'd find someone special." "I never expected him to be quite this special," Abigail admitted. "Not just because of who he is or what he has, but because of how he makes me feel." The ceremony was everything they'd hoped for: intimate, despite the number of guests, emotional without being overwrought. Sebastian's voice broke as he recited his vows, promising to cherish her always and support her dreams as if they were his own. Abigail, in turn, vowed to stand by him through all of life's challenges, to be his partner in every sense of the word. As they exchanged rings with the ocean as their backdrop, Abigail couldn't help thinking about the twist of fate that had seated her next to Sebastian at her cousin's wedding just 1 year earlier. How different her life might have been if she'd been assigned to another table, or if she'd given in to her initial impulse to skip the wedding altogether. At the reception, after their first dance, Sebastian pulled her close and whispered, "I have a confession to make." "What's that?" she asked, looking up at him. "I may have bribed the wedding planner to seat me next to you," he admitted with a mischievous grin. "I saw you during the ceremony and couldn't take my eyes off you." Abigail gasped in mock outrage. "You mean our meet-cute was engineered?" Sebastian laughed, the sound warming her heart as it always did. "Only partly. I had no idea if we'd even get along. I just knew I had to meet you." "Well, Mr. Nielsen," Abigail said, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him softly, "that might be the best investment you've ever made." "Without question," he agreed, spinning her around the dance floor. "And I intend to keep investing in our happiness every day for the rest of our lives." 5 years later, Abigail stood in the doorway of their home library, watching as Sebastian read to their 4-year-old daughter, Lily, and 2-year-old son, James. The children were nestled against him on the window seat, completely enthralled by the story of a little girl who discovers a secret garden. The Reed Reading Roadsters program had expanded to 15 buses serving communities across 3 states. Abigail now ran the entire operation with a staff of 20, while still finding time to read to her own children every night. Sebastian had restructured his company to allow him more family time, delegating day-to-day operations to trusted executives while maintaining strategic oversight. Their lives weren't perfect. They still had disagreements, still faced challenges balancing their different backgrounds and perspectives. But the foundation of their relationship remained solid: mutual respect, unwavering support, and a love that had only deepened with time. As if sensing her presence, Sebastian looked up from the book and smiled, the same smile that had captivated her at that wedding years ago. Lily noticed her mother and patted the space beside them. "Come listen to the story, Mommy," she called. Abigail crossed the room and joined her family, feeling Sebastian's arm wrap around her shoulders as she settled beside them. In that moment, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, she marveled at how a simple seating arrangement had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian murmured against her hair. "Just how lucky we are," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "And how sometimes the best things in life happen when you least expect them." Sebastian pressed a kiss to her temple, "Like being seated next to the love of your life at a wedding." "Exactly like that," Abigail agreed, watching their children's enraptured faces as Sebastian resumed reading. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the 4 of them, a family created by chance, choice, and a love that had defied expectations. Outside, the garden they'd planted together bloomed in riotous color, much like the life they'd built, beautiful in its complexity, stronger for the care they'd given it, and still growing, day by day, season by season, into something even more magnificent than they could have imagined on that first evening when a millionaire and a librarian found themselves seated side by side, unaware that they were meeting there forever.